You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram.
So, hello everyone. My name's Raymond Rhodes, and I've just recently written a book entitled A Test Debut. I live in Chester, in England. And my background is kind of very much, I was brought up with cricket from an early age. I'm very passionate about the game. I've read a lot of cricket books, which drives my wife absolutely insane. But I just thought there has to be a book out there about a test debut, the different debuts of different players. It's something that's not been touched on before. And I'm very excited to be on the show today. And you are listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Joining me on today's cricket discussion is the author of Test Debut, a book that focuses on the highs and lows and a variety of test debuts across players of different nationalities and eras. In particular, it focuses on the human side of the challenge and the way in which players deal with the intensity and nerves of the occasion. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Raymond Rhodes. Raymond, welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here, Raymond, and I'm very excited to talk to you about Test Debut, a book you've written recently and published, and it's doing very well, and that's why you're here, to promote the book and tell the story about it, and your cricket story, of course. But it's one of those things that we don't really talk about a lot, isn't it? About Test debuts and about players' experiences on a very special day of their career, and certainly a life-changing one as well. And I've had the honour of interviewing former Australian Test cricketers from Nathan Horrocks, Jason Gillespie, Peter George, Paul Blocker-Wilson, and Mike Whitney. And hearing them tell about their Test debuts and their stories of the occasion just really cements it that, it is a special thing, and everyone has a different experience, good or bad, in terms of making their test debut for their country. Some play one test, some play a few, some play 100. Every player's test debut and their career turn out differently. So I think everyone watching and listening would be intrigued to hear not only your cricket story, Raymond, but the book. I'm really intrigued to hear it. When I got your email about this, I jumped at it straight away. We're always on the lookout to, reveal people's stories about cricket. Everyone has a story, and we're going to hear your story today, Raymond. That's for sure. And everyone watching and listening will feel the same as well. Raymond, as I do with all my guests that I've interviewed on the podcast, I'd like to take them back to when they first got into cricket. And it's been very fascinating listening to people's memories on how they started to get into cricket. So, Raymond, let's go back to the very beginning, growing up. I know that's a long time ago. Time flies. What are your earliest memories of watching, playing, and even going to the cricket? And who were some of your cricketing idols growing up?
Well, my very first memories of playing cricket was really in the garden with my dad. He used to finish work, and the first thing I'd say to him when he got home was, "Oh, can we go and play some cricket in the garden?" And he always used to just love going out and bowling at me, and bowling and bowling and bowling. I suppose it kind of kept him fit as well at the same time. But yeah, just from that really, just from playing with my dad, brother also got involved as well. And then I remember for my 10th birthday, we got one of those blue quick cricket sets with the orange wind ball. And it was on my birthday. My dad bowled a ball and I hit it. And it went straight through, smashed the window and the house. And after that, my dad tried to kind of get us away from cricket towards something a little bit safer in the garden. But by that stage, I was too invested in the game. So I wasn't having any of that. I carried on playing my cricket. Played throughout my time at school, which I really, really enjoyed. The school was very big on cricket. I was very lucky when I was in, I think I was 17 at the time, I managed to get on a tour to the West Indies. And the tour was kind of designed that we followed the England cricket team around the different islands. So it was great because we were playing cricket and we were kind of watching England versus West Indies series. That was in 1998. But prior to that, the first test match that I went to was 1992, England versus Pakistan at Headingley. And England managed to win that test match, but they lost the series. And it was amazing because you had the likes of Wakai Yunus and Wasim Akram bowling, and it was when reverse swing had just come onto the scene. So to see those guys bowling at the pace that they did, with the amount of reversing swing that they're able to get, and seeing them bowl at some of the household names like Gooch and Atherton, it was just a really interesting series, and it kind of captivated me. But I was always the one in school. I had my radio on at the back of the classroom trying to get the test match score. I would always be kind of, when there was an Ashes series on, I'd be up at kind of 2 a.m, 3 a.m, listening, trying to get, I kept saying stuff, one more over, and then I'll call it a day. And, setting the alarm early the next morning, having to brace myself to see what the score was. So cricket was kind of very much ingrained into me from an early age, really. In terms of my idols, I suppose from most of the test matches I watched involved England. So at the time I was growing up, kind of Gooch as an opener, he was a big idol for me. Atherton was just coming on the scene. Alex Stewart as well, he'd just kind of broken onto the scene. Devon Malcolm, I just loved watching him bowl, the pace that he was able to bowl at. Tufnell as well, he was a good spinner for England. He always had quite a lot of flamboyance about his bowling. But yeah, so the first test match I went to was 92, but the first series that I really kind of was hugely invested in was the summer before that, when England played the West Indies in 1991. And that was my first look at players like Viv Richards, Patrick Patterson was bowling, then Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Malcolm Marshall as well, and seeing the way that they batted. That 91 series really got me captivated, and I was lucky enough, my dad took me to a test match the following year. But I owe my dad a lot, because he was the one that kind of persevered, playing with me in the garden. And from there, it just kind of cricket evolved into my life, really. So yeah, that's really my cricketing, how things started.
Yes, definitely. I think we could all relate to that, Raymond, even me and others listening and watching to this episode of the podcast. And that's just how you get into many other sports, really. But also cricket in the backyard, or you go down with your mates to the nets or in the local park and you have a bit of a hit and a bowl. That's what it's all about, and watching it on TV and radio
as well. It was a great one, because when I was playing, there's a lot of time with cricket, it goes on a long time. And there's a lot of time that you're waiting to bat, or you're having your kind of match to whatever. So there's a lot of interaction. So the friendships that you made from an early age was lovely, actually. And a lot of those people I've kind of still kept in contact with. And my parents as well, they'd go along, they'd integrate with other parents. Suddenly my dad would be thrust onto the scene, have to do some scoring or some umpiring. My mum would be making match teas. So it was such a kind of community feel to it as well, playing village cricket. So yeah, some of the friendships as well that we were able to make from playing cricket from an early age were brilliant. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. How would you describe yourself as a cricketer when you played, Raymond? What were you good at? Were you good at batting, bowling, all-rounder, or a specialist in one field?
I was a leg spinner. And I span the ball. I span the ball quite sharply, but my big problem was that I didn't have any variation. I could never bowl a googly. I could never bowl a flipper. Couldn't really bowl a faster ball. So batsmen, if they were in for any length of time, they kind of got used to it. It was just going to be that, that leg spinner that was going to go away from the right hander. Being a wrist spinner, it's quite hard to get the control. I struggled a bit with my length. I had spells where I'd hit the right length and I'd work into a rhythm and all the rest of it. But I also had spells where I was like, oh God, there's another full toss. There's another long hop. And I started playing men's cricket when I was quite early as well. So they just tonked me, into the tennis courts or into the car park. So for a leg spinner growing up, it was quite difficult, because you bowled a bad ball and you were gone. You were in the car park. So, but no, I kind of came in as a middle order batsman as well. Came in about 6 or 7. I got some good scores. I enjoyed my batting a lot. I'm very keen in the field. I used to, not many people like fielding at square leg because the ball tends to get absolutely smashed at them, but I used to really enjoy fielding at square leg and diving around, and being in the game as much as I could. So yeah, as I've got older, I've actually really enjoyed just umpiring.
Yeah.
I find it very relaxing. You've just got to make sure you count the right number of balls, you have a good interaction with the players around you, and you just feel so part of the game. So yeah, I guess actually that's one of the great things about cricket. It's not just the playing side, there's a lot around the game as well that you can get involved in. So even now that I've got a bit older, I'm kind of just feeling part of the game and doing what I can to be part of the game.
Yes, definitely. There's always something to do in a game of cricket, and off the field and on the field as well, which makes it so special. And I think everyone can relate to that. As you get a bit older, you start to get the creaks and the aches and the bones and the body. I just prefer umpiring or scoring or whatever.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that started off as fast bowlers and they've kind of ended up as a little dibbly dobbly off spinner.
Yes, right. Off the short run these days, not the long run as you used to back in.
Or players starting to bat a little bit further down the order. They used to be a number 4, number 5. They're now kind of coming in at 8, 9, just about holding on to their place in the side.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think everyone can relate to that these days in the game. But yeah, it's very interesting to hear your recollections and your memories, Raymond. I always find it fascinating whenever I ask this question to all the guests that we've interviewed on the podcast. It's always great to hear how they got involved in the game and still are a part of the game of cricket, even years on, which is what this game does. As soon as you're hooked for life.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's one of those games that
I think as well. There's because there's different forms of the game. There's something for everyone. So I was always brought up with Test cricket. I love the kind of ins and outs of Test cricket, and kind of you watch it for half an hour. You can go back into it kind of an hour or two later, get yourself back embedded in the game. But if you're a bit more fast-paced, like the younger generation now, 2020 cricket is for you. Or if you feel like, 50 over, you want to have the actual whole day. Even the 100 in England has massively taken off. So just because one format doesn't necessarily suit you, there are now different formats. And I think that's an interesting facet of the game as well that other sports don't necessarily have.
Yes, definitely. That's what probably makes cricket unique to other sports, really. 3 formats that we have, and different formats, different preferences for people to watch and to go and enjoy the sport, really.
It makes you wonder how many more formats we're going to have. I mean, like I say, the 100 is such a big thing now in England. You wonder, are we going to start going down? Is it going to be 10 overs versus 10 overs? And, I kind of hope in a way 2020 or the 100 is going to be the quickest version we're going to have. I don't think I could manage anything much quicker than the...
No, but I think that's just the way things are going at the moment. Everyone wants things quick and fast these days, and especially with cricket. But yes, as you said, it's always changing and evolving, really, cricket. And it's one of those sports that people still love in their special ways and have their own preferences, really. But the reason that you're on here today, Raymond, talking to me is talking about your book that you've written called Test Debut.
A Test Debut. Yeah.
A Test Debut, I should say.
Yeah.
Good to get the correction there. As I mentioned earlier, it's basically focusing on stories and experiences of players who've made their Test debut in Test cricket from all different countries and different people and experiences, and how really how special the occasion is, really. And as I mentioned before, I've interviewed a few Australian Test cricketers that have played for Australia and played Test cricket themselves. hearing them talk about their Test debut and all the nerves and the anticipation that went into it, what they remember of it. Some people don't. They don't even remember it because it's a bit of a blur. That's just the occasion and the, the sense of, my life has changed forever playing Test cricket for your country, and all these emotions happen. So you decided to write a book about that, covering all these different aspects and areas of it. And I suppose it's never really been done before. I can't really recall a book in the cricket world that has really touched on this sort of topic, really. So it's quite fascinating that you wrote about it, and very interesting to hear your thoughts about it and how you went about writing the book, the reasons for it, and the process of that. So talk us through that, Raymond, in terms of, writing the book. What made you want to write something about this in the game of cricket, people's Test debuts, and the process behind writing it as well? How did you go about structuring the book and all those things that you do when you write a book?
Well, I guess the first thing was that I've always enjoyed reading different autobiographies and different biographies from different players and different eras. And it drives my wife insane, but they must have about 150 different cricket books up in my study upstairs. And as I've kind of delved into them, I realised that this is an area that hadn't really been touched before. Everyone's got a Test debut, and when you read people's accounts and experiences of their Test debuts, they recall them, as if they were yesterday, because it was such a big event in their life for them. And some of the stories that go with players making their debuts are really fascinating, based on the tensions that they felt and how they handled the situation, and some of the amazing stories that came out of Test debuts. And I thought this is an area that really does need to be explored. So I went back over the autobiographies and biographies, and I slowly started doing the research, which took me about 2.5 years to put it all together. And then I kind of divided it up into, how players got the call, because over different periods, different ways and means of getting the call. Originally, there was telegrams to tell players that they were making their debut. Then it was a case of they'd hear on the radio. Players 30, 40 years ago, the news would be delivered on the radio, and then a telephone call, and now even teletext. And now players are kind of, certainly in England, are centrally contracted, so that communication is a little bit easier. But even, going back before they actually step onto the field, there's a few stories relating to their debut. So how they got the call, the reaction to the call, the tensions that they felt, the preparation when they met up for the first time with the international side, and then just kind of approach, like how they actually handled the debut itself, those 5 days, and everything that was thrown at them. What were their feelings when they went to the crease for the first time, and then kind of afterwards, how did everything sink in? What were the celebrations like with the team? What did you learn from the experience? But even some of the great stories, like there's some brilliant sledges that came out, over the course of a debut. Some stories with the umpires. So yeah, just really everything that is relating to a player's debut, and the different experiences around them. So it was a case of just going back over the books that I'd read, piecing it all together, listening to different podcasts. And then when I'd done that, I realized, actually, there's going to be an interesting book here that there's some such fascinating stories to be told. So that was kind of where it stemmed from. And it kind of went from there, really.
Yeah, sort of went down a rabbit hole, really. Just
absolutely.
Couldn't stop.
And I think as well, you're right, because with a Test debut, everybody has a Test debut. So you could literally just keep going on and on and on and on. And the hardest thing for me was, where do I stop here? I could stop there, which is a nice point to stop. But actually, so-and-so has just released a book. I want to find out about his debut and see if I can incorporate it. So it's like working out, how do I actually say, right, okay, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to, piece it all together from what I've done. So it took quite a bit of discipline to say, right, that's me done. I'm going to put this together now, or I'm going to go down the publishing route with it.
Well, how long did it take you to gather all this information? What was the time frame that we're talking about here?
It took about 2.5 years to do the research, to write it, and then go down the publishing route. So yeah, it took. There was a fair bit to it, because it was a case of getting all the information, then thinking about how can I organize all this information, put it into the various chapters, and then it was a case of bringing these stories to life, and then it was a case of kind of doing all the proofreading, doing all the referencing, finding the right publisher. So yeah, it was about 2.5 years really to get everything done and published. So yeah.
Yes, people don't realize that. Writing books is, I'm going to write a book. It's not as easy as that. There's a lot of prep work and preparation.
If I'm honest, I probably underestimated how big a project it was going to be.
Yeah.
It literally did. It started as a hobby, and then it got a bit crazy. And before I knew it, I had kind of like 100 books that I was trying to reference, and I'm still growing. But it was a fascinating project to do, and I really enjoyed it. And actually, as I was writing the book, because I've loved cricket now for I'm 45, so about 35 years, you kind of reminisce in all the stories that you remember yourself. Oh, I remember when that player made his debut, and that player, and I was only 12, and I remember watching him play on TV, and now I've got the story that relates it. So there's a lot of kind of like your memories in there as well of some of these players as you bring the stories to life.
Yes. You're sort of writing the story yourself, really. You're sort of in that moment, picturing what's going on. It's, visualizing, what these players must have gone through. It's quite surreal. In terms of, living these stories and what it must be like.
And some of these stories are very different to how you would imagine them, because someone like Matthew Hayden, for example, in England, we have this feeling that he's this big left-hander, never going to take step, always covering your faults. He came in as a last-minute replacement, so didn't have, the right equipment. And I think he made 15 and 5 and got injured by Alan Donald. So it's not a case of this is just someone that can deliver in any situation, that is this like very tough opening batsman. He's human just like the rest of us, and a lot of the players are the same. We think of them as these amazing figures, which they are, but they also have that human side that we all have, and kind of relating that story was really fascinating.
Yes, definitely.
Shane Warne was another one. In England, we just absolutely revere him in terms of the skill that he's got. I know he's had, when he's bowled over here, he's the crowd are a little bit on his back, but there's a huge amount of respect for him. But if you go back to his Test debut against India, I think he got 1 for 150, and he quoted in the book that he just wanted the ground to swallow him up, but unfortunately there was no ground to swallow him up. So it kind of goes back to this whole human side of, we all struggle when we're kind of put in a situation for the first time. How do we deal with it? Just because he's got this incredible test record doesn't mean he didn't go through the tensions that we will go through. So yeah, I think that was quite an interesting aspect for me, seeing these big, tough cricketers, but actually, they went through the same tensions and nerves as what you'd expect anyone to go through on a debut.
Yes, definitely. They're human after all, really. They're not, these different sort of humans. They're like you and me, and they're ordinary people. And that's what I found when I interviewed those Australian Test cricketers that I've had on the podcast. They're ordinary people. Their story is no different to us in life, but they were rather good at playing cricket, and they were able to make that next step to play for their country. So, everyone has a story to tell. And especially when it comes to your, Test debut in particular, and that's what you wrote about. How many players did you mention in the book? How many players did you end up settling on in terms of stories and all that?
I've not actually counted the number, but just as a guess, probably about 120, 130.
Well, that's quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter, I've kind of divided it up into aspects of a debut, and then I brought in the players' stories that fit into that chapter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say probably around about 130 or so. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Is there one story, if people decide to pick up the book and read it themselves, Raymond, is there one particular story that they should pay attention to from your side of things, when you were doing your research and putting it together?
I love the fact, one of the things that I do actually really like is, particularly Australian players, when they get the call and they're going to make their test debut and they get the baggy green cap for the first time, how much they treasure that baggy green cap and how much it means to them to receive it for the first time. And nowadays they get presented it. There's a ceremony before the test match where the debutant gets the baggy green cap from a former player. And so you've got the link between the past and the present. And just reading about what that baggy green means to that player and the history of it. And some players, they talk about how they put it on in their hotel room and they walk around the room for the first time with their baggy green and they're pretending to play their shots around the hotel room. And, you can just see how much it does actually really, really mean to them. How much work has gone into, getting the chance to make a test debut and with it, receiving that baggy green cap. From an England point of view, we don't necessarily have the same kind of cap culture in that sense. But before the test match started, traditionally, not so much now, but before test match started, the team would meet up and they'd have a dinner on the eve of the test match. And the debutants would always sit next to the selectors. And the players always said it was just a moment they dreaded. Because you're sat on a table with the whole team, and as a debutant, you're really, really nervous anyway. But then to have to sit with the person that selected you for the test match and try and engage in small talk and polite conversation, they said it was just the worst preparation possible for a test match. So yeah, that was also something that really stood out for me. Just the reaction of players. Some players, when they receive the news, they're just over the moon. They never thought it was going to come. Some players like Michael Holding were just so relaxed, and they're like, "Oh, great! It's a game of cricket. I'm going to go and enjoy another game of cricket." So just reading about the reaction of different players, how they dealt with the nerves and tensions. Different players had different ways and techniques of dealing with it, and it was really encouraging to hear some debutants say that some of their teammates deliberately came up to them, had a chat before they went out to bat, just to try and reassure them. And I thought that was really nice. But there were also some great stories of what went on in the middle. Jimmy Ormond, I always remember, played his test debut in 2001. He was an England player, played against Australia. And it must have been really daunting. It was a very tough Australian side, that 2001 side. And Australia, as they were in that period, were way ahead of England. And Jimmy Ormond went out to bat, and the first thing that he heard was Mark Waugh in the slips say, "Mate, what are you doing here? You're not good enough to play for England." And Jimmy Ormond, quick-witted on debut, I can't believe how he came out with it so fast, just turned around and said, "Maybe not, but at least I'm the best player in my family." So there's quite a few stories there of different sledges and what went on in the middle. But also, I kind of feel sorry that some players had such incredible debuts, but other things that happened in the match kind of overshadowed their debut. So it was quite interesting bringing some of those things to light. I mean, in 1993, the same test match that Shane Warne bowled the Gatting ball, Peter Such for England also made his test debut as an off-spinner. In the first innings, he took 6 wickets, bowled beautifully. And England thought, great, we found our spinner that we've been looking for all this time. Over to England to bat. Australia had been dismissed fairly cheaply in that first innings. Who comes on? First ball, Shane Warne, spin, drift, bowls the ball of the century, the Gatting ball, and poor old Peter Such, everything that he's done to that point, getting those 6 wickets, all forgotten in the space of one ball, because Shane Warne has bowled the ball of the century. So I always feel really sorry for Peter Such. He bowled beautifully, but obviously overlooked through the ball of the century. Some of the bowling debutants, they remember the big day because they dismissed a key batsman. So Jonathan Agnew, who is most renowned now for TMS, for Test Match Special on the BBC, He made his Test debut in 1984, and he got the big wicket of Viv Richards in that Test match. And Ian Botham knew Viv Richards very well, and he said to Agnew, he said, just keep everything short until I tell you, I'll give you the signal to pitch it up. So for 4 overs, Agnew bowled shorted him. And then Ian Botham gave him the signal. He said, right, I want to pitch it up. He pitched it up, had him LBW. And I always thought, what a first wicket to have claimed, or I think it was his second wicket, but on debut to have got Viv Richards out. Monty Panesar, Test debut, got Tendulkar out and asked him to sign the ball at the end. Tendulkar wrote, Monty, once every blue moon, or something like that. And then Monty Panesar got him out a year or two later, and he said to him, I said, that blue moon's coming around a little bit too often for my liking. But yeah, just some of the stories around getting some of the key batsmen out. Batsmen going on to get hundreds on debut. Some incredible stories. One of my favourites was actually Graham Thorpe in 1993, very tough Australian side. Went out there, got 100 at Trent Bridge in that third Test match. The Australians were sledging him. He was only a young kid at the time. And the umpire had to intervene and said, do you want me to stop all the vile language, Graham? Thorpe said, no, it's helping me concentrate. Just stop them if they start spitting at me. And he came off and he hit a brilliant 100. And unfortunately, England weren't able to go on and get the win, but Australia hung on for the draw. David Steele, 1975, came out to bat, and he was quite old at the time. I think I'm right saying he was 35. He had grey hair, he had these round glasses, and he came out to bat in that Ashes series. And when he came down to bat, he went down 2 flights of stairs and ended up in the toilets. And he eventually made his way to the crease, and the Australians, they were getting stuck into him, and they were saying, oh, it looks like Dad's come out to bat and all the rest of it. And Rodney Marsh behind the stumps was laying into him. And he turned around to Rodney Marsh and said, you see this arse of mine? You're going to be looking at this for a long time, so you might as well get used to it. But yeah, as I say, everyone's got a story to tell on their debut, and it's been brilliant bringing some of those stories to life, really. There was one as well. Nick Knight made his debut in 1995 against the West Indies at Old Trafford in Manchester. And he made his debut against a very, very tough West Indian side. Had Ambrose, Walsh, Kenny Benjamin was in the side. Ian Bishop was in that side as well. And I always think to myself, before he went out to bat, he must have been thinking, how do I counter these incredible fast bowlers coming at me from different heights, different angles, all the rest of it? Do you know what it was that that his biggest problem was that day? It wasn't the West Indian bowlers. Of all things to stop playing Manchester, what would you least expect?
Those greenhouses that shine. Yes. The
sun was reflecting off the greenhouses, and they had to come off because the batsman couldn't see the ball. And it always makes me laugh. Nick Knight on Test debut, all the different threats the West Indies were throwing at him that day, it was the sun in Manchester that stopped play. Even some of the celebrations at the end, the Australians loved to sing Under the Southern Cross I Stand, and Adam Gilchrist said actually when he looks back on his debut, that was the most enjoyable thing for him, was just singing that together as a team for the first time. He said that was one of the big highlights of his Test debut. I think just all aspects of the debut throw different kind of areas of fascination, which I've really enjoyed researching, really.
Yes, definitely. It's quite unique to the individual, I suppose. It's their special moment and their special story that they can always tell their friends and family and anyone else who asks, really. It's quite an intimate moment as well, that you finally realize that you've made it.
But it's something that no one can take away from you.
No, that's right.
You've got the cap, you've got the story that goes with it. Not many people get to represent their country at any level, so it's something that you've achieved.
Yes, definitely. And when I spoke to Mike Whitney about his Test debut and playing for Australia. He said, I'm just humbled. I didn't play a lot of Test matches. Only played 12, and a few ODIs. He played 38 ODIs in total for Australia. I played international cricket. Played with some of Australian cricket's great players in the 80s and 90s, and just grateful for everything, and just so happy for that opportunity to come. So everyone has a different perspective.
I mean, one thing that was quite difficult was looking at debuts that hadn't gone so well. And there's a section in the book called Disasters, which focuses on that side of things. I always felt very sorry for Roy Park, the Australian Roy Park, who made his Test debut in 1920. And he was a doctor, and he'd been up all night. He was obviously on call all night. And he made his debut the following day, obviously very tired. And he went out and got a golden duck. And his wife was in the crowd, and she was knitting. And the story goes that she dropped her ball of wool, and she bent down to pick it up. And as she came up, she realised she just missed her husband get out. And with it, his whole international career, that was the only Test match he played, was suddenly gone. So that was quite a sad one. We had a player called Gavin Hamilton, who was a Scotsman. And he played very well for Yorkshire. He ended up on the tour to South Africa, the Millennium Tour in 1999-2000. He played in the first Test, and I always felt really sorry for him because he'd been really hyped up in England. And he went out there and he got 0 for 63, and he also got a pair, and he never played again. And again, I just feel so sorry for him because he'd had an amazing season for Yorkshire just prior to that tour, and there was a lot of hype about him. And even in the 90s, early 2000s, players tended to get 2 Tests to prove themselves. He just got that one. Henry Alonga, the Zimbabwean, who was the youngest player.
Interviewed Henry, actually.
He was I think, have you interviewed Henry Alonga? I can't remember.
Yes, we have.
Amazing guy. Oh, incredible guy. He's done a bit on Test Match Special when Zimbabwe were over here last summer. Incredible guy. But I didn't realise that he was the youngest player ever to make his debut for Zimbabwe. Yep. And he was also the first black player to play for Zimbabwe. He was handed the ball, and the nerves obviously on him. Young kid at that stage, under the spotlight. First ball went for 4 wides. Second ball, really good bounce. The third ball, he got a wicket. And then suddenly the Pakistanis were complaining to the local umpire, Ian Robinson. And before he knew it, he'd been done for throwing. And the captain, he wasn't able to bowl him because another warning would have meant he wasn't able to take any further part in the game. So he kind of went away dejected. He felt he'd let down Zimbabwe in cricket. He felt he'd let himself down, his family, his players down, everyone. And that was really quite heartbreaking to kind of uncover that debut in that way. Equally, we had a player called Alan Wells who made his debut against the West Indies in 1995. Again, he played for Sussex. He had been really built up. He scored a huge amount of runs for Sussex. And he got out first ball. Curtly Ambrose came in, bowled slightly short of a length, and it just ballooned up, took an inside edge, ballooned up, and he was caught. And on his way back to the pavilion, you could see him saying to the camera, sorry. And again, that was really heartbreaking. And also Fred Grace, who was the brother of W.G. Grace. Again, a very sad story. He made his debut in 1880. And he made a pair, got a pair, so 2 scores of 0. And that was the last Test he ever played because a few weeks later he died. He got an infection on his lung and unfortunately died. So, yeah, there's some sad stories as well in there. But as with a reflection of life, there's the good stories, the happy stories, the exciting stories, the sad stories. There's kind of a little bit of everything in there. Ollie, just on the disasters as well, Ollie Robinson. His one was an interesting one because he made his debut in 2021 against New Zealand. England fast bowler and bowled beautifully in that Test. And we all thought, oh, great, Anderson was coming to the end of his career, Broad was coming to the end of his career. We were looking for another fast bowler, and we thought, well, this guy's really got it for England. And like I say, he took wickets. I think he got New Zealand captain, the guy that's just retired. I've forgotten his name now.
Kane Williamson.
He got Kane Williamson out. I think it was LBW. But on the first day of the match, people started delving into his social media, And there was a lot of kind of sexist comments in there from kind of 10, 15 years ago, and racist comments. And he had to be banned for pretty much the rest of that summer. I think he came back towards the end of that summer, but that was his debut. He did really well on the pitch, but unfortunately, all this stuff was uncovered. And for him, he will remember his debut as a bit of a disaster. Yeah, I mean, Andrew Strauss as well. He made his debut in 2004 against New Zealand, got 100 in the first innings, and he was on track to score 100 in the second innings, but was run out for 83. And he was run out by Nasser Hussain. And I always felt so sorry for him because he did amazing, get 100, and then he got 83 in his debut test match. But just think of the records that would be there if he'd got 200s on test debut. And to make matters worse, well, not worse, but Nasser Hussain went on to go and score 100 in that game and won the game for England, and then retired straight afterwards. So all the work that Strauss had done had kind of a little bit been, outdone by Nasser Hussain. But he had opened up a slot in the side for Strauss, who more than took it with both hands. So yeah, like I say, different stories, happy, sad, exciting, tension, bit of everything in there.
Yes, capturing all the emotions that go into the day, really, and what happens over the course of a match. You can have all these emotions. And, it's just the game of cricket, really. It sums up the game of cricket. You go through all different emotions when you play. This game, it can reward you, but it can also bite you where it hurts. And many players have experienced that over their time.
And interesting enough, a lot of debutants did really well on debut and then struggled. So it just shows that cricket has this habit of, yes, you get rewarded, but you've got to make sure that you don't kind of relax too much. You keep putting yourself under pressure, you keep working hard, you can't take anything for granted. But equally, there's a lot of players, like I say, that really struggled on their test debut that went on to have incredible careers. I'm thinking Don Bradman. I mean, I didn't realise this, but Don Bradman made his debut, scored 18 and 1, and then got dropped the following test match. And then he was brought in for the following test match, and I think he got 100, and that was kind of like his run started there, and he ended up with an average of 99. But yeah, it just shows, like, even the best, and there was no one better than Don Bradman in terms of average, he struggled in his first test match. And was dropped. So if it can happen to Don Bradman, it can literally happen to anyone. There was a funny story, actually. Niall O'Brien, the Irishman, in his debut test match against Pakistan, he was out for a duck and 18. And a few weeks later, he was playing in Chester. And one of the Chester players sledged him. He said, don't worry, this guy's only got a test average of 9. And I always thought to myself, you missed one there, Niall O'Brien, because you could have turned around and said, yeah, well, so did Don Bradman after his first test.
Yes, definitely. In fact, everyone in that Ireland test match were all making their debuts in that.
They were. And actually, that's another thing that's been interesting, looking at some of the new nations. And literally, they were all making their test debuts.
Yep.
You look at Zimbabwe in that first test match, all of them making their test debuts. Even 1877... the very first test match, both sides were all making their test debuts, and there are still records from that first test match that haven't been broken since.
Yep.
So you think of about 2,500 tests have been played between the first test match in 1877 to where we are now, and there are still records that exist from that first test match.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. We didn't even mention that, new countries making debuts, and all countries have been through that. And
like I say, umpires making their test debuts as well.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, some of the, again, just talking on some of the, not so much sad times, but there was also like injuries as well that players got on their test debut, which was quite hard to read. Andy Lloyd, 1984, made his test debut for England against that mighty West Indian bowling attack. And they had England on the ropes all that summer. But in his Test debut, he got hit by Malcolm Marshall, really nasty blow. And where he got hit, his eyesight in that eye was reduced by 35%, and he was never able to go on and play another Test match again. So yeah, and I think I'm right in saying the helmet he wore that day is still in the museum at Edgbaston. So it's a kind of like warning sign for what happens when you face a supreme fast bowler. I mean, Justin Langer, I always loved the story of Justin Langer's Test debut in 1993, where he went out to bat as an opener late on day one. And I'm pretty sure it was first ball he got hit. And David Boone was batting with him, and he came down the pitch, and David Boone said to him, he said, "Mate, there's no heroes in Test cricket, retire now." And Langer, he was his Test debut. He wanted to prove, his place in the side. He kept on going. He saw it through to stumps that night. Came out the following day, and this time it was Boone the following day. They got hit by Curtly Ambrose, really nasty blow. And Langer, the young new kid on the block, came down to David Boone, the established player, and said, "Mate, there's no heroes in Test cricket. Retire now, Mr. Boone." And Boone just turned around and said, "Yeah, I think you're right." And he walked off and retired. And Boone said to him at the end of the Test match, he said, "Test match cricket will never get any tougher than that." And Langer said, yeah, he said at the end of his career, he was right, actually. Test cricket didn't get any tougher than what he went through on that Test debut. I think Australia lost that by 1 run, but Langer got a lot of runs against that mighty West Indian attack. Patrick Patterson made his debut for West Indies in 1986. What a fast! But people say he was the fastest of the West Indian bowlers. He might not have got. He didn't play for that many years. But people that faced him said he was the fastest of the lot, out of kind of Ian Bishop, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Malcolm Marshall. They said Patrick Patterson was just a bit quicker than the rest of them. And on his debut in 1986, Gooch, who never took a backward step against fast bowling, and he had a great record against West Indies, even Gooch was saying to himself, maybe I should just get out to this Patrick Patterson. He is bowling at the speed of light. And he actually caused a very nasty injury to Phil Edmonds. It was a bit of a beamer and it hit him. There was a very, very nasty injury, and Phil Edmonds' wife met Patrick Patterson not long after in the British Embassy, and she said, "Are you the man that tried to kill my husband?" And she said, "Oh, better luck next time." Going back more recently, Jofra Archer, I always remember his Test debut at Lords in 2019, and Steve Smith was the informed batsman for Australia and batted beautifully. We didn't know, England didn't know where to bowl it in that summer. But Jofra Archer, he bowled this incredibly ferocious, quick passage that just had him all over the place. And it's the first time, the English fans and me as an Englishman, we thought we have found like this incredible fast bowler that we've been lacking for so many years. And unfortunately, he caused Steve Smith a really horrific injury, hit him on the neck. And he had to go off, and he came back on later that day, but then that night I think he had concussion, so he wasn't able to take part in the rest of the match. But that was Jofra's debut. Horrible to see a player get injured, but I think a lot of English fans were thinking, like, we've unearthed a seriously quick and pretty dangerous fast bowler here. So yeah, and then there's even stories of players that really had to earn their stripes. Players that played for years. Scott Styris of New Zealand. If anyone had to earn their stripes before earning their Test debut, it was him. He was due to play for New Zealand, got injured, so wasn't able to play that Test match. He was in Pakistan. He was told he was going to play his debut. They'd given him his cap the night before, and then there was a terrorist attack in Karachi. He wasn't able to play that, so then had to wait later on in the year before he made his Test debut against the West Indies in Grenada. Scored 100, got second innings runs. I think he took the wicket of Brian Lara. What a debut he had, having had to really wait. Robin Jackman, 1981. He'd been on the county circuit for, I think, 18 years before he had his opportunity to play his Test debut. The problem that he had was his wife was South African, and he played cricket in South Africa at a time when the apartheid was going on, and he arrived in in Guyana, and the Guyanese government, they refused his visa. They didn't allow him to enter the country. So England turned around and said, well, if you're going to dictate terms like that, we're going to abandon the test match. So they played next test match in Trinidad, and he made his debut there. But having waited 18 years and then gone through that whole affair, he was certainly another player that earned their stripes prior to making their debut. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything in there.
Yes, definitely. And I suppose, it's quite fascinating because no one's really written about these sort of things, as you mentioned. So it's good to, put it all together, collate it all, and really explore this topic, really. Whereas other people just mention it in their biography and that's it, and they talk about the other things in their careers. So it's quite fascinating, actually, and makes you think about players and what they experience on a very special day in their career. And as we've discussed so far, it's takes you down that rabbit hole, really, as you've experienced in terms of researching for the book. Would you say, from your personal point of view, in terms of going through the process of writing it, researching it, getting it out there on sale, publishing, for anyone who thinks about writing their own book, doesn't have to be on cricket, but if it is, or other things they're passionate about in life, what advice would you give them in terms of your experience dealing with the process?
I think the thing that I learned more than anything was that it kind of started as a hobby. And then as I got more into it, it kind of progressed from there. But as I did it, I just found it really relaxing because I was doing something that I had such a passion for. So it kind of took over a little bit. And the more I delved into it, the more I wanted to find out, the more work I put into it. And don't have me wrong, there was a lot of hard work. There was 2 and a bit years of research and putting it together. But when I saw the product at the end and I thought, wow, that is 2.5 years of hard work and it's there to see it as a product at the end, I thought, wow, this is incredible that I've been able to put this together in the way that I have and come away with it. And it's also kind of given me the confidence to say, do you know what, I'd quite like to have a go at another book and, think about a topic that I could research in the same kind of way with the same enthusiasm. Hard thing is, like you say, trying to find topics that haven't been done or interesting topics that are new. So yeah, it's. But I think in terms of advice, it's just pick something you're passionate on. Whether it be a hobby or something you're looking to promote or whatever, and just enjoy it and just use it as an education for yourself as well, more than anything.
Yes, it's sort of that self-discovery, learning about different things you never learned before about a particular topic you're passionate about. There's always something to learn about in cricket every day and other things that you're passionate about. So it is rewarding, but with a lot of things, there's a lot of hard work and sort of like playing cricket, really. There's a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. And then when you finally get it done, it's quite rewarding and satisfying, really. And that must have been the emotions that you felt when you finally put it to print. And
yeah, I mean, there were times as I was writing the book, I thought I'm never going to be able to finish this. There's so much to it. And like I said to you earlier, it's a case of with a debut, everyone's got a debut and you can just keep delving into it more and more. It's nowhere when to stop. Yes. But there were times when things were piling up and I suddenly thought, crikey, I've got so much information here. How do I do this? How do I do that? How am I going to reference it all? And I thought, am I really ever going to be able to get this done? So to have kind of had the motivation, enthusiasm to get it done and then see the products, like you say, it's a very rewarding thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. Was there anyone that inspired you? Any particular cricket author that inspired you, or you like their style of writing? Or there's been quite a few in the game's histories that have been very good authors that people always revered.
I've always thought when I read autobiographies of captains, they always have a really interesting story to tell because it's not just their journey. They're responsible for the whole team and the direction of the team and how they utilize their skills to kind of bring everyone together and get the best out of players. I mean, actually, if I go back, I really enjoyed the autobiography of Steve Waugh because he was just he was just such a tough cricketer. he may not have had like the absolute natural talent that a lot of players have had, but and Mark Waugh was probably the opposite. He was such a talented player, but Steve Waugh just had that steel, that toughness, and the way that he installed his players around him to kind of feed off him in that way, and become one of the most successful captains that Australia have had. I found, reading his stories, and he was also someone that when he went on tour, he liked to experience the local culture and see as much as he could. So some of the stories of traveling around the different places he went to really inspired me. So yeah, I mean, Nasser Hussain was another one who was a brilliant captain for England and took over English cricket at a time when they were literally rock bottom of the world. In 1999, they'd lost the home series to New Zealand. They were bottom of the world in the ICC rankings. So for him to turn English cricket around in the way that he did, working closely with Duncan Fletcher, the new coach, and to kind of, he was a very tough leader, and he expected a lot from his team, but he'd always back them up. And just understanding how his man management got the best out of players, again, that was a really interesting read. But I think to answer your question, just reading the different captains and seeing how their leadership techniques has influenced the team, I think that's been something that's been really interesting as well.
Yeah, definitely. You can also gain some inspiration from other people's books and how people write and think about the game or think about it differently. Captains,
Shane Warne as well. I always thought Shane Warne, and I don't know if you'd agree with me on this one, but I always thought he could have made such an incredible leader, captain. Yeah. When he's read his book and his knowledge of the game and like understanding how to work opponents out, and he was one of these players that was play hard, work hard. He had some brilliant stories to tell. He'd always fight really hard on the pitch, but if someone did well, or if someone scored 100 or he'd be the first one shaken by the hand. And his autobiography, I thought, kind of epitomised the way he played the game and how he got the best out of players. Some people say that bowlers don't necessarily make the best captains, but I always think with Shane Warne, he just read the game so well, and he knew how to work a batsman out. And as a captain, I think he would have had the nous to deal with the players and to be able to kind of stick to his plans to get the best out of his players. I mean, Matthew Hayden, again, very tough cricketer. I mean, he started off, had a difficult baptism in Test cricket, but came through it. And actually, that was another, to answer your question again, that's another one I really enjoyed. Players that had really difficult debuts and started off found Test cricket really hard, but then came through that. Like how they managed to find a way to come through that. What was the turning point? How did they kind of reinstate that confidence in themselves to get through that very tough baptism? Matthew Hayden kind of epitomises that a little bit. Very tough debut, very tough start, but probably one of Australia's best opening batsmen. And even the 2005 Ashes series, had a really difficult time. But came back from that. People, I think, thought maybe he's finished. He's really struggled here. England worked him out. What's his future? Went away, scored a lot of runs, and then Australia hammered England in the following Ashes series a year and a half later. Justin Langer as well, similar story, tough start, tough baptism, came through. So yeah,
definitely, absolutely. Everyone likes a battler story, I suppose, an underdog story. Certainly in Australia, they like that underdog sort of mentality, and players who've had to grind and battle it, over their careers, is definitely, some people can definitely relate to that and respect that.
I mean, Mark Taylor is another one, just falls into that category. I mean, he had various points in his career where he went through real barren patches, but he always found an innings in him when it looked like he was going to be dropped or the Australian selectors were kind of, mulling things over. He always found that innings. I always remember 1997, that first Test match at Edgbaston that England won. But going into that Test match, Taylor hadn't scored any runs, and there were calls that maybe he should go. He found a way to grind out 100 in the second innings. But there were various points in his career he did the same, and I always have a lot of respect for that. You remember the Steve Waugh 100 against England in 2000? and 2002.
2001 at the
Was
Oval.
it 2001? Was it early 2002? Was it Sydney?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were
under
talking about the Oval one when he was batting on one leg with his calf.
No, it was
2002-3 Sydney.
He
Yeah.
was under pressure then.
Yeah.
And that 100 that he scored then, I mean, what 100 that was. And I think he scored the 100 off the last ball of the day. And the crowd, the eruption from the crowd. But to do that under the pressure he was under for his place. Yeah. So these great players, I equate it a little bit to tennis. They always find an ace when they really need one. They win those big points when they most need them. Some of these great players, when they're on the verge of getting dropped or things aren't looking good for them, they often find a way to put in a big performance. Alistair Cook did the same for England in 2010. Looked like he was going to get dropped. Got 100 against Pakistan in I think it was the last test of that series, and that saved him when he went on to have that incredible Ashes tour in 2010-11. So yeah, reading about how these players kind of come through those patches and find a way to get through has been fascinating as well.
Yes, you mentioned Alistair Cook, one of those rare players to play from his debut into his last test and never got dropped or injured or anything like that.
And actually, his debut was a fascinating one because he wasn't in the initial squad when they were in India. He was with the England A side in the West Indies. But Trescothick pulled out of the squad. So there was a position that opened up as an opener. So he flew out from West Indies to India, and he was suddenly thrown into the first test in Nagpur. Got 100 on debut, and I think he got 60 in the first innings and 100 in the second innings. And I thought that says a lot about him, to have been thrown into the squad, not knowing anyone really in that squad, to go from the West Indies to India, not know the conditions in India, completely different to what he was used to in the West Indies, but to come through that with the 60 and 100, I thought that said a lot about him as a player.
Yeah, definitely. And he had a very fine career for England.
And a good captain, yeah.
Yeah, yes.
But had a good bowling attack.
Yes, well, that always helps. So it's quite interesting and quite intriguing to explore this topic and talk about it, and unpacking all these stories that players have, and it's never been done before. As I said, I can't recall another cricket book that's actually done this before, so it's quite unique in that. Raymond, you're probably a trendsetter, doing something like this and something different, but it's quite amazing.
As I was writing it though, I did think to myself, there's so many situations in life where you do something for the first time, or you kind of put yourself in the deep end, and you kind of think to yourself the safer option would be not to do it. And like, this is a similar situation. You go from quite a safe kind of first-class career, county cricket or state cricket or whatever, and you're suddenly making that huge step up. And just learning how players deal with that is quite reminiscent of how anyone goes through, a changing career or, a big life-changing moment. I think that's what's great about reading cricket autobiographies and cricket books or any sports book for that matter, is seeing how people deal with that challenge and that change for the first time.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's quite interesting hearing those recollections and what people write about and experience about. Now, if people want to buy the book, Raymond, and you're trying to convince people to buy it, what is the one thing you'll say to those people that are looking at your book and thinking about buying it? What would you say to convince them that it's worth a read and you'll get a lot out of it?
I think just the fact that it is such a broad range of experiences and stories from different eras, different players, different teams, having to face one of the toughest challenges of their cricketing career and how they go about doing it. So like I say to you, it deals with so many different areas, the tensions, the emotion of getting that test debut, receiving the cap, meeting players, learning how to deal with the intense nerves of going out to face your first ball, how different players from different eras are able to meet that challenge. And like I say, there are some great stories that go with it. That's kind of what got me into the topic in the first place. So that's kind of what I'm trying to sell to you as well. And actually, just to go back to one of your previous questions, one thing that has been really fascinating as I've kind of researched the book is the players that made their debut on tour seem to find that easier than the players that made their debut in a home series. And I think the reason being is because when you're on a tour, you are very much together as a squad. You know, you meet up together, you fly out there together, you share the same kind of experiences together. So when you go and make your test debut, you already feel part of that squad. And I think that's really important. And even when you go out there and make your test debut in another country, because you've been on that tour, you've got used to the setup there, you've got used to the wickets, you've got used to the climate, you've acclimatized. Whereas when you come in and make your debut at home, often you kind of thrust in straight away. You might not know the players, you might have only met up like 2 days beforehand. Everything seems a little bit of a rush. And the expectation as well of a home test match, playing in front of your home crowd with the media and everything as well. So after a while of research the book, I did realize actually it's the players that make their debuts on tour that have often done better and found the experience easier than the ones that have made their debut in a home series. And I found that really fascinating. I tried to look into whether it was easier for an older player to make a test debut or a younger player. And it's quite hard to find a pattern there. I mean, the older players find it easier in the sense that they've got more life experience. They know how to handle like the big names around them. They can put things more into perspective because of the life experience that they've had. So it might not be as daunting, but equally they know if they fail at the age that they're at, they might not get another chance. So it still comes with an awful lot of pressure. Whereas the younger players, they often find meeting up for the first time with these big names much more of a challenge because they're only, say, 19, 20, 21, 22. So for you to meet up and play against or play with some of those household names will be such a big moment for you in your career. But equally, because you're young, you know you're going to get more chances, and you've got more kind of, you know, you've got less fear in some respects because you just go out and play a natural game and you're still learning your game. So it's quite hard to find a pattern there. So, yeah. I mean, the other thing I'd say is that England players, I don't know if it's the same for Australia, but England players, before central contracts came out, found it extremely challenging to make their debut. After central contracts, it's still challenging, but because you're in that setup of being a centrally contracted player, you know that culture, you know the setup, you know the players, so it's kind of easier to slot in as a result. Whereas before 2000, when players were contracted by their counties and not the national setup, you were suddenly thrust into the action, met up like a day or two before the test match, didn't know the players, and it was extremely hard. You knew that you only had 1 or 2 test matches to prove yourself. If you didn't, you're outside. Whereas since central contracts came in 2000, you were very much part of that system, trained with the players, knew the players, might have been on an A tour together, might have been in the squad together beforehand, you know, but you knew the setup, so it was easier coming in to make your debut in that setup.
Yeah, definitely. I think it does make a bit of a difference.
You only have to look at the results of English cricket as well to see that. Before 2000, English cricket was really struggling, particularly in the 80s, 90s. Central contracts came in 2000. There's been a huge, turnaround in performances.
Yes, definitely. I think that's probably made a difference across the board, across the world, really, in cricket. Professionalism and, paying the players well. That's certainly changed what has happened in the old days. Whereas now it's try and make it more special, your test debut. I was thinking about, you talked about the baggy green and, listening to the Australian players I've interviewed on the pod, talking about what it means to them. I always ask them, what does it mean to you? And it's special. Yeah, it's a piece of cloth. It's a piece of felt. But it's something special. Whereas now, back in those days, the baggy green wasn't as held in highest regard as it is now. Probably sort of Mark Taylor, Steve Waugh sort of changed that with the traditions of presenting the caps. to the debutant on the field with the team around them, or get a former player to present a baggy green. I think Adam Gilchrist was presented by Bill Brown.
Yes.
The member of the Invincibles.
Two of them made their debut in that match. I think, was it Miller? Was it Scott Miller? Gilchrist and Miller both made their debuts, and they got presented by Brown, who was he a member of the Bodyline series?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. And I always think, actually, that reading that part in Gilchrist's book was incredible, because it's kind of, you got the link there between the past and the present. And I think building on that link is something that
it's a club. Really well. It's a club. It's, past players have done it before you and all that stuff, and you have a number as well. Mike Whitney said, before I made my debut for Australia, I didn't know we had numbers.
Yeah.
Until much later on, then you realise it. So
yeah, but I think what it does, I think it makes the baggy green. It kind of it brings something to it, doesn't it? It makes it mean something. If a past player is giving it to you, it kind of, there is the link between the past and the present, and you feel part of something. You feel part of that. Am I right in thinking it was Steve Waugh that first brought in that culture of a past player presenting the cap?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Which is a good move. And then now everyone's doing it around the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone does it now, don't they? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Atherton,
Mike Atherton, in his autobiography, he was given his colours and his cap by David Gower. And he literally, Gower just had it in a bag, and he just threw it to Mike Atherton and said, I think you'll be needing these. That was in 1989 on his debut. So, the fact that it is such a ceremony now, I think it just makes it so relevant what the cap means.
Yes, absolutely. And it means something special. When we talk about, as we were talking about players and things happening in certain test matches, Raymond, the second test between England and New Zealand, that's just gone in your summer, with those debutants playing in the second test of that series under different circumstances, with Stokes and Atkinson missing out and they have to be drafted in. Memorable for all sorts of reasons. So it just shows that, cricket can be unpredictable, and, sometimes it can take the gloss away from the occasion and that. So that's just something that popped into my head. And for those players in question that debuted, probably what happened before that test match and the lead up and all that stuff that went with it sort of overshadows their.
Yeah, I guess I think you're right. I think it did overshadow it, but I think the other way of looking at it is that those players probably wouldn't have been under the same pressure that they would otherwise have been under.
No, that's true. Yeah,
they only came in to make their debut because of the situation around what happened with Stokes and what was going on with English cricket. So they knew they were kind of replacements. There wasn't a lot of pressure on them as a result. So as a result, they probably had a bit more freedom to enjoy their test debut. Whereas I feel sorry for players where there is so much pressure on them and so much expectation that when they go in and make their debut, it's almost like it's just too much for them. Graham Hick, very talented player, had that situation. He had to qualify. He was brought up in Zimbabwe. He had to go through this qualification process. I think it was like 7 years. He had to play county cricket. And he scored loads of runs for Worcestershire. He scored 405 in one game. And by the time he made his debut, everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing in English cricket. And he just obviously couldn't handle the pressure. And he was kind of in and out of the side. So I think they're the players where the expectation is on them that I feel very sorry for.
Yes, definitely.
There shouldn't really be. The players haven't played any Test cricket. I sometimes think, why are we putting so much expectation on them?
Yes, I think that's the thing really these days, is that whenever someone comes in, you expect them to be excellent from the start. An example of that is Sam Constas, who debuted for Australia against India in Melbourne. He smashed Jasper Bumrah around, scored a 50, and everyone thought, promising debut. And then the second test, it sort of didn't quite go the way he would have expected. And then he hasn't played much since and went to the West Indies last year and struggled there, and now he's out of the side. So, he's still young and he's early 20s. So I think people have those expectations of, you're a professional cricketer, you should be able to handle the pressure and all this stuff. But it's Test cricket. It's a different sort of pressure.
And I think as well, nowadays, a lot of players are picked for Test cricket based on their performances in, say, the IPL or franchise cricket. So the fact that we've seen them perform against star names, on sometimes an international circuit, if they played 2020 or World 2020 or whatever, we just automatically think, they're going to succeed at Test cricket. Whereas before, I don't think that was the case. You didn't have the IPL, you didn't have all this franchise cricket. Players weren't able to get picked just on playing against star players in another setup. This young lad for India is a 15-year-old.
Yes,
when he plays his first test, I can't imagine the pressure he's going to be under, with what he's done in the IPL. I mean, there's going to be a huge amount of pressure on him making his debut. I feel so sorry for him. But you've got to say to yourself, he's not played any Test cricket. He's still learning his game. He's 15.
Yes, well, it's sort of Sachin Tendulkar vibes about him, because Tendulkar debuted when he was very young.
The Tendulkar wasn't under that pressure, was he?
No, he wasn't. But Tendulkar
had a very tough debut against Pakistan. He faced Waqar Younis, who was also making his debut in that game, and Wasim Akram, and he said he was just all at sea. He said the step up from the cricket he was used to Test cricket, he said, was just insane. So it took even Sachin Tendulkar a while. He had a very difficult Test debut, and he said he was just glad that he was picked again in that series. He did, the night before when he was picked for his debut Test match, he did say to himself, he put a lot of pressure on himself. He said, "I'm now one of over 1 billion Indians who has been picked in the final 11 to play for my country." So he obviously put a lot of pressure on himself beforehand.
Oh yes, well, he turned out to be a great player.
Yeah,
on those early years, that's for sure. But I suppose it's just one of those things, really, that people expect all athletes, not just cricketers, to be good when they get there at the top level. But it takes time, and even the great players, not all of them had a good start to their career, and then they started to learn their game, learn who they are as cricketers or people, and really believe in their own talents and abilities. And that's why they turned out to be the best players that we've seen in the game.
I think Test cricket is probably harder to learn in, because if you're making your debut, say, in 2020, it's literally you're in the same gear. It's just crash, bang, wallop. Whereas if you make your Test debut, when you make your Test debut, there's so many scenarios you could be in. You could be batting time. You could be playing the conditions. You could be seeing a bowler off. You could be seeing the new ball off. You could be thinking, right, I need to counter punch. I need to put the pressure back on the opposition. There's so many different scenarios that you're faced with. So it does take you longer to work out how to react in so many different scenarios. So I think making your Test debut is probably a lot harder than, say, 2020, the 100, because you are just in that one gear when you're in that format of the game. But then that's what makes Test cricket so fascinating at the same time.
Yes, definitely. Well, Raymond, thank you for joining me today for this cricket discussion. I've enjoyed it immensely and learned so much from our chat today, and hearing your story about your cricketing connection and writing this book, A Test Debut, covering this particular topic in the game, has been very fascinating. And I hope all of our listeners and people watching this episode will feel the same. So, Raymond, if people were to get in touch or they want to get a copy of the book, where can people do that if they want to buy a copy of the book?
So it's on Amazon Books. And there's a Kindle version and a paperback version there. And it's A Test Debut. Yep.
And we'll leave links in the description of this episode so people can check it out and put it on their list of cricket books to read this summer. Certainly worth the read, that's for sure, after what we've heard from you today, Raymond, about it. So we'll do that. We'll leave links in the description of this episode so people can check that out and put it on their list of cricket books to read in 2026. So hopefully we can get the sales up, Raymond, after this episode gets published. Hopefully. Before we go, remember to like, share, comment, subscribe and click the bell to make sure you get latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Also, the podcast is available on Anchor, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts. Once again, thank you, Raymond, for joining me today for today's cricket discussion. I hope all of you watching or listening to this cricket discussion with Raymond learned a lot about Raymond and his cricketing journey and his book, A Test Debut. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.